This episode of the Tony Robbins podcast is brought to you by Tony Robbins Results Coaching. Are you ready to experience an extraordinary quality of life? Or maybe you're already doing well, but you know you can take your life to a whole new level. To do that, you have to set yourself up to win. You need a process, a way to consistently grow and produce the results that you need. That's what a Tony Robbins Results Coach can do for you. Whatever area in your life you want to change, your relationship, your health, your career, or your business, coaching is one of the most valuable tools you can have. It's an investment in yourself, and it can yield some of the highest returns. Tony Robbins Results Coaches are hand-selected and trained by the master of coaching, Tony Robbins himself, to have the skills that will empower you with supreme focus, powerful insight, and the accountability needed to achieve everything you've ever dreamed. To help you get started, Tony is offering podcast listeners a free results coaching strategy session with one of his top coaches. It's a $200 value, and you're getting it for free. Visit TonyRobbins.com/results. Schedule that free session today. Welcome to the Tony Robbins podcast. In this episode, we're bringing you an exclusive conversation Tony had with the world-renowned pioneer in integrative medicine and personal transformation, Dr. Deepak Chopra. For those of you who aren't familiar with Dr. Chopra's work, he has his medical training in internal medicine and endocrinology, and he has gone forward to combine Western medical science with Eastern healing and thought practices to create an entirely new approach to medicine, known as the mind-body connection. Dr. Chopra is a fellow of the American College of Physicians, a member of the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, an adjunct professor of executive programs at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and an adjunct professor at Columbia University Business School. Time magazine described him as one of the top heroes and icons of the century, and the Huffington Post Global Internet Survey ranks him as the number 17 most influential thinker in the world and number 1 in medicine. He's authored more than 80 books, which have been translated into over 43 languages, including numerous New York Times bestsellers. The list goes on. In this exclusive conversation between Dr. Chopra and Tony Robbins, you will learn about the power of the mind-body connection. You'll learn about the power of changing your perception and consciousness, and what it means to become more aware of your body and how it processes intelligence and experience, and how that can ultimately change your life.
I am extremely excited to be sitting across the desk here from a gentleman who I've respected for many years. His name is Dr. Deepak Chopra. Dr. Chopra has a pretty phenomenal history, and many of you who have been with me throughout the years know how strongly I feel about the power of physiology to shape human emotion, human behavior, and ultimately our destiny. And the choices that we have to make along the way rather than giving the responsibility to somebody else. So to be with Deepak Chopra, I just want you to know this man, I believe, is one of the living masters in being able to teach people the fundamentals of what reality really is beyond the physical body, what really shapes our lives. So it's really a privilege to be with you, Deepak.
It's a privilege to meet you, Tony. I've admired you for a long time.
Well, thank you. We're here in Lancaster, Massachusetts, and we're at the Ayurvedic Center, Health Center here. And I think maybe what we could do is start out by just giving people a little bit of your background. You have a very traditional medical background, and yet now you're considered by most to be, I think, the foremost expert in the area of understanding mind-body medicine or psychoneuroimmunology. Why don't you give us a little background? Where did the shift happen for you?
The shift happened a while after I had been in practice. I was an academic to start with. I was teaching at Boston University School of Medicine and at Tufts and for a while at Harvard. And that part was so exciting from an intellectual point of view and so challenging that I was very happy doing that. But when I really started going into practice and seeing patients, I found that the academic intellectual challenges, exciting as they were, really had very little to do with how people got well.
Yes.
I was sitting there spending all my day writing prescriptions, and at the end of the day I would feel that I had been a legal drug pusher, because what was I doing? I was writing prescriptions for tranquilizers, sleeping pills, and antibiotics. If I ever told my patients, listen, maybe if you stop smoking or cut down on your alcohol or changed your weight, perhaps we could wean you off some of these drugs. And they'd say, well, you know, doc, my mother-in-law says the same thing. She doesn't charge me $50. How do I do it? And if you look back, you realize that medicine perhaps has all the answers, but it doesn't have the technologies to make people want to change.
Yes.
Or even if they want to change, doesn't have the technologies to show them how to change.
Yes.
It was very frustrating. So it was my unhappiness that led me out from what I was doing.
Pain drove you to something.
Yes, pain.
So what was the evolution of it then for you? Where did you begin to look? You were born in India, correct?
Right.
And so was your experience, your exposure to Ayurvedic medicine back then, were you going back to your roots? What triggered you to go there for the answers? Or did you start out there?
No, but actually I had a background in India, and some of it was a distorted perception of what Ayurveda was. I used to think of it as some kind of folklore or folk medicine.
Yes.
With a lot of herbology, but nothing more to it. In 1980, I started practicing transcendental meditation. In 1985, I was at a medical conference, and Maharshi was there in Washington. And after the conference, he sort of asked me to come to his room, which I did out of politeness more than anything else, because I wasn't interested in anything that had to do with quote-unquote mysticism.
Yes.
And I found him to be a very practical man. And we talked for a while, and he said to me that I should look, with my background in medicine, I should look into Ayurveda. I was polite enough to say that I would, but I didn't mean to. I left the meeting, and I went to the airport to go home. And at the airport, I met an old friend of mine from medical school, and he handed me a book. He said, "This is about Ayurveda. Maybe you find it interesting." So I said, "There's some message here."
Yes.
I read the book. It was fascinating. I went back to Maharshi. I said, "Send me to India. Let me meet all the people who are experts in it. I really want to get into this." And I did.
Wow. Now, at that time, were you the chief of staff at New England?
Yes, I was.
They must have thought you were crazy.
Yes, I was. And initially the response was, yes, that I was off the wall. My partners didn't know what I was up to. Some of them were even embarrassed about all the things I was engaged in. But I didn't care anymore.
You're on a mission.
I was on a mission, yeah.
Now, what began to make you believe that you really had found some answers here beyond your traditional medical training?
For one thing, I was able to influence people in a way I had never been able to do it. I was able to make them lose weight or stop smoking or give up alcohol, to make them want to be healthy. And then I started seeing some dramatic remissions in illness, in chronic illness. I'd have patients come here, for example, and they'd be taking 15 medicines, about 10 for their problem and 5 for the side effects from the medicines that they were taking. And within a week or two, we'd have them off everything, and they didn't have this problem anymore. They'd have bronchial asthma for 15 years, and now they don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
Or they've been taking drugs for arthritis for 10, 15 years. And it's not there anymore. And then when we started seeing occasionally a dramatic remission, and somebody would say cancer, you start thinking, what's really happening here? Are we really, we've missed out on perhaps a few billion years of learning experience, because the human body, as it turns out, is an exquisite pharmacy. It makes every drug that Hoffmann-La Roche makes and more.
Better quality.
Better quality, the right dose, the right target organ, no side effects.
Cheaper.
Cheaper. You have access to it, and all the instructions are there in the packaging.
Yes.
So I said, yeah, and it's evolved over billions of years of evolutionary time. All the mistakes, you can make the precise antibody for pneumococcus because some ancestor a few 100,000 years ago perfected that technique, and you have it inside your body.
In your DNA.
In your DNA. So why not use this huge library of information?
So what prevents us from doing that?
Interference.
Social hypnosis?
Yeah, it's the hypnosis of social conditioning. It's violation of basic, simple laws of nature that make our body function. There are simple processes going on in our body all the time. The simple processes are eating, breathing, digestion, metabolism, elimination, and something that controls all of these, and that's consciousness. Thought, at a very fundamental level, non-verbal, not linguistically structured and verbally elite and speaking in the English language with an Indian accent, but at
but communication,
but communication,
at a cellular level.
Network of communication, a network of intelligence, communication, and information, which is controlling all these processes. You get in touch with these processes, and you eliminate 95% of all disease. You can even reverse most of disease if you get in touch with these basic life processes. That leaves about 5-6% of disease, which is genetic. But even genetic disease is the stress of our ancestors. If we pay attention to what we're doing in our generation, we'll be doing the next generation a lot of good.
Makes sense. You and I both know from our mutual studies and individual studies that the power of belief to change biochemistry, to change instantaneously the way the body responds to anything. It's that sense of certainty. And some people are trying to pursue it through affirmations and pumping themselves up, but rarely does that really give you the sense of certainty. Whatever we're certain about really in our heart of hearts seems to show up in our body. And I think I read once you said that the body is a printout of our consistent thoughts or our consciousness. Tell me, what is the biggest misconception that we have about the human body? What is the metaphor that we're using that's keeping us locked in where we're always at the effect of rather than understanding we're truly the cause of our experience?
The biggest mistake is that we are steeped in the superstition of materialism. The superstition of materialism says that this world is made up of physical objects in space and time, and if there is such a thing as thought or consciousness, then it's the epiphenomenon of matter. In other words, if I have thoughts and feelings and emotions and desires and instincts and drives and likes and dislikes and passions and hatred, if I believe in God or heaven or hell or salvation or damnation or communism or feminism, all these things occur because there's the dance of molecules in my body. That biochemical reactions somehow produce the epiphenomenon that we call thought. That we are physical machines that have learned how to think. Well, in fact, it's probably the other way around. Not probably, surely the other way around. We are thoughts that have learned how to create the physical machine. We are impulses of intelligence in a larger universe of intelligence. This is a thinking universe. We are impulses of intelligence in a larger void of intelligence that have learned how to create physical matter. We create the mind. We are not the mind. We create the mind. We create the body. And through our body and our mind, we ultimately create the experience of the world. By itself, the world is just quantum soup. It's a radically ambiguous, ceaselessly flowing field of all possibilities. And out of that field of all possibilities, we can create anything we want. We're like King Midas. Only he knew only how to create gold. Everything he touched turned into gold. We can create anything we want.
Greater level of choice.
Infinite choices.
Yes. Tell me, what is the body?
If you went to a physicist, a really first-class physicist, and asked her, what's the real...
Asked her, I like that.
Asked her, what's the real nature of the physical body? She might say, if you could look at it, not through the artifact of sensory experience, then you'd see, which is, the superstition that what I can see and touch and taste and smell is the way things only are. That's wrong. After all, my senses tell me that the earth is flat, and nobody believes that anymore. The senses tell us that the ground we're standing on is stationary, and we know it's spinning at dizzying speeds.
Or the light we see in the sky at night is still there when it may be gone millions of years ago.
Exactly. Yes. So forget the superstition of materialism and begin to see things as they really are. Well, the physicist would tell you that the body is a dynamic field of energy, information, and intelligence that's constantly renewing itself in every second of its existence. That you, in fact, make a new body once a year. That even this moment, you have 1 million atoms in your body that were once in the body of Christ, or Buddha, or Genghis Khan, or Leonardo da Vinci, or Saddam Hussein for that matter. That your physical body is a river of intelligence and information. 98% of all the atoms come and go in less than 1 year. You make a new skin once a month, a new skeleton every 3 months, a new stomach lining every 5 days. Even the brain cells that you think with as carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, they weren't there 1 year ago. And the DNA, the genetic material, which holds millions of years of information, the actual raw material, the carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, comes and goes like migratory birds every 6 weeks.
So let me ask you a question. Somebody has cancer, and the first thing that the average person does, obviously, is immediately respond with horror, with fear. They immediately are told by their doctor they have so much time to live, or they have so much percentage of chance of living. They now think to themselves, I have this thing in my body I've got to get rid of. What you're saying is that thing in their body they call tumor is not going to be the same tumor a year from now. Is that true?
It's true. If I look at an X-ray and see a tumor and I compare it with the tumor from 6 months ago, am I really looking at the same tumor? The answer is, on the material level, no. Every single atom of carbon, of hydrogen, of oxygen, of nitrogen that makes up this tumor is not the same, is different from the tumor 6 months ago because of the rapid changeover.
Right.
However, because the underlying quantum mechanical framework is the same, in other words, the cellular memory is the same, or the underlying physiological processes at a non-material level are the same, it keeps coming back the same way. It's like if I had the ability to change every brick in this building once a year, but I'm stuck with the notion this is the only way to do it, I'd get the same looking building every time. If I want to get rid of this tumor, I have to exorcise the ghost of this tumor. And by the ghost of this tumor, I mean the impulses of information, energy, transformation, memory, conditioned response, all the things that structure the non-physical aspects of the tumor that result in this physical expression. It's estimated, for example, that we have 60,000 thoughts a day. That's not surprising. The disconcerting thing is that most people, 95% of the thoughts they have today are the ones they had yesterday. So we become bundles of conditioned reflexes and responses constantly being triggered by people and circumstance into very predictable biochemical outcomes, behavioral outcomes, and ultimately physical outcomes. So, the body turns over 6 billion cells a day. 1% of these are mutations. So everybody's body has cancer cells all the time.
That's right.
But we get rid of them every day.
Problem is, though, if we keep putting the same cause in motion, the same thought cause, the same belief cause, the same expectation cause, then we're going to keep getting the same results because we're going to take the material and we're going to translate it accordingly. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. The recipe remains the same. You can take the same ingredients, have another recipe, and you'll have something else.
Because we're funneling it in identical ways.
Exactly.
So until we change, it sounds complex, but what we're really saying is until we change our basic core fundamental beliefs, our sense of certainty about what is and what will be, then whatever we're certain about will be in our lives. As we think, so we'll experience.
Exactly. In fact, Tony, what it is it's an interpretation of what's happening to you. If I go out on a joyride on Magic Mountain in Disney World, and my interpretation is at a deep level, somewhere, I believe, as you said, in the deepest part, this is fun. Then my body makes interleukins and interferons. These are powerful anti-cancer drugs.
That's right.
If you had to buy interleukin to treat melanoma or kidney cancer, a full course would cost you something like $40,000 and a lot of side effects. But you could take that joyride and make $1 million worth of interleukin-2 if at the core of your being you were having fun. On the other hand, if your interpretation was this is terror, then you'd make cortisol and adrenaline and all kinds of things which destroy the immune system. The difference between destruction of the immune system and stimulation of the immune system, a difference which could mean the crucial difference between life and death, is an interpretation.
One of the things that I teach everyone is that your experience of reality is information times focus equals personal reality. And it's not just having the information, it's focusing upon it. Whatever we focus upon becomes real for us. So in any moment, there are millions of ways of focusing upon anything, interpreting, coming up with a meaning. Whatever meaning you come up with, you will feel. What you're saying is that whatever meaning you come up with, you'll not only feel, but the fact that you're feeling it becomes your reality biochemically.
The chemical, the molecule, is the meaning.
Wow.
The molecule is the meaning. If an experience, I take an experience and I say, this is a very tranquil experience. I'm having the experience of tranquility. At a deep level of awareness, my body, my leukocytes, my adrenal cells, my macrophages will start churning out Valium. This Valium, unlike the one that you buy from Hoffmann-La Roche, is the real diazepam. It is the molecule of tranquility.
Yes.
And it modifies and modulates the activity of the immune system so that cells can do their job in tranquility. The meaning that you give to an event is the event.
Yes, exactly.
Is the event.
What I call it is the label you put upon experience becomes experience.
Exactly, because there is no such thing as actual reality. There is only the perception of reality.
That's correct.
See, and that perception of it is an interpretation that the self makes to the self.
So if you can become more effective at setting up your systematic way of interpreting life experience so that the meanings you consistently create are empowering in terms of emotions, then they're also going to be empowering in terms of physiology.
They structure, they become the physiology.
Wow.
See, the Vedic Rishi, from where this knowledge, my knowledge of Ayurveda comes, says, when I realize who I really am, I realize that I'm not in the body is in me. I'm not in the mind is in me. I create both the body and the mind through my self-interaction. That's all there is.
You're saying that we aren't thoughts, we're the maker of the thoughts.
Yes, we are the thinker behind the thought, and that's in the gap between our thoughts. And in the gap between our thoughts is a little window, a little corridor, a little transformational vortex, you might say a little tunnel between which the individual mind and the cosmic mind communicate. The cosmic mind being a larger field of non-local field of information and energy. So if I say I'm going to take off my shoe, I could change that sentence to say I'm going to put on my shoe. Or I could say I'm going to make a phone call, or I'm going to have chicken soup. Between the going to and the next word, a little gap of silence where there are infinite choices. So in every second of our existence, we have these little gaps where we are the thinker behind the thought,
yes,
who has the ability to make infinite choices.
And at any moment, we could change the choices we made in the past.
Right.
As long as we don't go into cultural or personal hypnosis where we get stuck in a pattern.
As long as we realize that we are not the thoughts, we are the thinker of the thought. The thought is something that I create through my own self-interaction. And for that, I think there's a moment, if you take, to stand behind and become a witness of the whole process. It's so obvious that, if I ask you to make a choice, choose this or this, I have two things in my hand.
I can always say, I'll take this.
Or you can say, you'll take this, because you have infinite choice, or I'll take nothing, I'll take that.
Right, makes sense. Let's talk about placebos, because everyone's heard about placebos. I don't think most people in our culture
realize what a placebo is.
Yeah, I really don't think
the word, in fact, of course, the placebo, the word comes from the Latin root, I shall please.
Yes.
But what a placebo is the mechanics of creation. Originally, when placebos were found, they were discovered with analgesics, painkillers.
Yes.
So, and somebody found that if I gave you something which wasn't a painkiller, but you thought it was a painkiller, if I told you, look here, Tony, this is something that's going to kill your pain, and even inside there was nothing, not even sugar, it was biologically inert, then you would make something that would relieve the pain. And in fact, I could give you Narcan, which is a narcotic antagonist, and block the effect of the painkiller. In other words, the conclusion of this was that when you believed you were killing the pain with this drug, your body was making out stuff that was more powerful than any heroin you could buy on the street.
Wow.
Millions, in fact, 40,000 times more powerful than any heroin, as a result of just the idea that this thing really works.
Again, this is not an affirmation. This is not pumping yourself up.
No.
This is not trying to convince yourself.
No.
It's just somebody said, if you wear this garlic, I'll tell you what, you're going to have the pain disappear. You're going to smell so bad, you're going to run away.
Exactly.
But when people believe that,
Yes.
which means when they feel certain, they send the neurotransmitters out.
They hold this thought to be true. That's it.
That's it.
They hold this thought to be true, then the body sends out this heroin, which is more powerful than anything you can buy on the street. But now, the interesting thing is, I go to somebody else and I give them the same thing, and I say, this is going to get rid of your ulcer. Now, to get rid of the ulcer, you don't make heroin. You can't make a narcotic. You've got to make a very specific molecule. It's called an H2 receptor blocker. It has to interfere with hydrochloric acid binding to the receptors. So it's a very specific chemical. Now I give you the same thing that I gave the other fellow who made heroin out of it. Okay? Now I give him this other person the same thing. He makes an H2 receptor blocker. I go to a third person and he has high blood pressure and I need to lower his blood pressure. And for him, he needs another specific thing, which is called a beta blocker. It's another molecule. And the two couldn't be more dissimilar. He takes the same thing and he makes a beta blocker. Placebos work in cancer. You can go to somebody and you can say, well, this is a very effective chemotherapeutic drug. Not only will the cancer respond, but because they think it's chemotherapy, their hair will start falling out. They'll develop bleeding in the gums, and their platelet counts will also drop. So in each case, what you're doing is you're taking a belief, which is a thought, which you hold to be true, and converting it into a very specific molecule.
A biochemical reality in your body immediately.
Completely different printout.
So in essence, what you're saying then is, if we could just get control of our sense of certainty, that internal notion, as I think you call it, where we actually were the director of it, which we really are anyway. We stop seducing ourselves or allowing others to be the director of our own thoughts. We can create any chemical we need to heal our bodies, and that's what I'm hearing you say. Is that true?
Yeah, because we are the makers of our bodies. You go to a deeper level in your awareness and you end up discovering that, in fact, you do create even the molecules of your body in every second of your existence.
Very powerful. Let's talk about nocebos, because just as a belief that something is going to heal your body can cause you to create the chemicals to make yourself healthy, the belief that something is going to destroy your body can create an equal challenge, can it not?
You see, nocebos are the opposite of placebos. And in Australia, for example, there's an Aborigine culture where if you don't like somebody, you can go to the local witch doctor. And the local witch doctor will give you a little stick, and he says, point the stick at the person that you don't like, and that'll take care of him. And so the person goes, takes the stick and points at the person that he doesn't like, and after a while that person starts throwing up, starts having vomiting, and loses their appetite. They get emaciated, and within 1 week they're dead. See the effect of that idea, the word itself. There's an ancient expression, and first there was the word, and the word was made into flesh. Well, in today's scientific terminology, we can say first there was the quantum event, and that was made into the neuropeptide. But the fact is, that impulse of information literally translates into a space-time event, and that space-time event is a molecule in your body. So the word cancer is a nocebo. I say, Mrs. Smith, you have this breast cancer, it's metastasized to your lungs and bones, and you have only 3 months to live. Now, if she is a believer and she's simple, then she'll take that information and translate it into that reality.
When you say she's simple, you mean that she just accepts the doctor as knowing what...
She accepts the doctor. She has relinquished her power to the words that come out from her doctor. And
who's a very caring man. And teaching what was taught him.
Yes.
Right.
But see, the statistics, what we call medical statistics, could be collective nocebos.
Yes.
They could be collective nocebos. I have read something in a certain manual, a scientific manual, and the scientific paper says in this particular disease, lung cancer, the mortality is 90% in 6 months. Now, I have no way of knowing when a patient walks into my office in which category he falls or she falls. She could easily be in the 10%. But because I have this statistic which I read, I reinforce it. 90% chances are that you won't recover. Now, the poor fellow has gotten the wrong information because he could easily be in the 10%. In fact, maybe if we all started not employing these statistics,
maybe the percentage would change.
They would change. Because what the statistics are, a collective nocebo response.
Powerful. Now, I remember you quoted in one of your books a study where they took, I believe it was rats, and they used camphor And
Right.
why don't you share that study? That was very fascinating.
Well, they took rats and they gave them injections of a chemical called poly-IC, which is an immunostimulant. It stimulates the immune system. And then they had them smell camphor at the same time.
Right.
And after a while, the rats would just smell camphor and stimulate the immune system.
So neurologically, they'd been paired, or those listening, this is simply an anchor, as we call it.
An anchor, as you call it, and neuro-associative condition response.
That's right.
As you would call it.
That's right.
Now you take another group of rats and you give them something that destroys the immune system and have them smell camphor at the same time. After a while, they'll smell camphor and destroy the immune system. Now you have two groups of mice or rats. In one group, if you expose them to pneumococci, they get pneumonia and die of it in a few days. If you give them carcinogens, they get cancer and die of it in a few weeks. Nothing happens in the others. The crucial difference between survival and death in these mice is the interpretation of a memory that they have linked to a stimulus.
And again, I think the reason I brought this example up is this is not a conscious memory, as most people think in terms of consciousness, in terms of linguistics or communication. This is a neuroassociation, as we would call it.
Yes, but it's not only a it's a cellular association.
Yes, I understand.
Because the whole body is
at the deepest level.
At the deepest level.
Yeah. Because when I first started doing my work, one of the things I started to experiment with was taking people who had allergies and saying, listen, we've done this anchoring where you change what your nervous system associates to something, or probably more accurately, what your cells associate to something. We've done that with emotions. You think of your boss, and we should have had to condition it now so that instead of feeling this pain and worry or upset or anger or resentment, or automatically now you feel good. You don't have to think about it, it's automatic. Let's try this with your allergy. And I'll never forget, think of a time when you really absolutely felt vital physically, where you could just storm through anything, where you felt like nothing could stop you. And I would create a series of anchors where I could just touch them, for example, and bam, just like the camphor, they felt immediately incredible. They were firing off biochemistry. I wasn't familiar with that level. I just knew what I could see physiologically in terms of their posture and their breathing. Then I'd say, okay, now we're gonna bring this element in. And we did a variety of things, cat hair and so forth. People had those types of responses. We would fire off the anchor, expose them, cat fire off. Pretty soon, cat hair made them feel great. They weren't sneezing. They didn't have the response. And when I first started telling people about it, they said, oh, this is anecdotal. But what I'm beginning to see now more and more, that this is, as you say, not just neurological, but at a deeper level. This is at a cellular level that we're conditioning ourselves in how to respond.
Yeah, and the cells are nothing other than fields of information. And those fields of information are nothing but self-interpretations. That's all they are. In fact, I'm sure you know of this condition called multiple personality syndrome, where a person may be diabetic and go into a diabetic coma in one personality, and another personality they don't have diabetes, where they have arthritis or something else. So their whole physiology changes. We take the same knowledge that you are talking of in terms of neuroassociative conditioning, and we use things like aromatherapy and condition, for example, a person to respond to the memory of a certain smell and teach them at the same time to slow their heart rate or get rid of the ulcer.
Wow.
So next time they have their ulcer pain, all they have to do is take a little bit of that smell, apply it over their upper lip, and the pain goes away. Or you have hypertension, you just do it and the blood pressure falls.
Wow.
So it's very effective.
That's exciting.
Yes.
Well, as you know, I'm sure olfactory is the most profound in terms of altering state of all the five senses, and it's the deepest, I believe. Doesn't your nose develop before your brain develops as a fetus?
In fact, the nose, the olfactory bulbs are the hypothalamus. They're extensions of the hypothalamus, which is also called the brain's brain. And it controls emotion, memory, autonomic function, which is all the things that are happening spontaneously in the body, or we think they are happening spontaneously. These things, along with memory, are very closely, intimately linked. And behavior, of course, is an outcome of all that.
Of course. Well, I've been working at the grossest level called behavior. You've been working at the cellular level. I'm impressed.
Well, it's the same thing, actually.
Yes, well, they're completely tied. There's no doubt. Well, I remember reading, I thought a nice phrase, I may be paraphrasing it, but you said, nothing happens in the mind, nothing happens without it happening in the body, I believe is what you said, something to that level. And I think most people just don't realize that when they let themselves just go behaviorally, or let themselves just go emotionally, that they're really letting themselves go biochemically.
Right. See, the thing is, we still have this idea that the mind and the body are two different things, but they're not.
Yes.
The body is a mind. In fact, the new terminology is body-mind.
Right.
And the body at a cellular level, go beyond the cells, you end up with molecules. Go a little beyond the molecules, you end up with atoms. You see, these atoms aren't material objects, they're particles, and the particles aren't material objects either. They're fluctuations of energy and information in a huge void of energy and information. So you get to so far beyond the facade of molecules, and you start ending up with a cloud of nothing. And you go beyond that cloud of nothing, and then you're left with absolutely nothing. But this absolutely nothing is the essential
That's what the something is.
The essential raw material of the universe is non-material. The essential stuff of the universe is non-stuff, but it's not just non-stuff, it's thinking non-stuff. Because out of its own nature, it creates everything.
The Tony Robbins podcast is directed by Tony Robbins and hosted by Anna Yorg. Carrie Song is our executive producer. Tyler Culbertson is our associate producer. Brooks Loro is our digital editor. Special thanks to Diane Adcock and Mary Buckheit for their creative review.